Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 555. This was a really short game, so I am going to take some time to explore the opening. This was a London system, so here let's put the first few moves on the board. D4, D5. You can play either knight f6 or d5, and when your opponent plays bishop f4, which can be played in either order, after either move, after either knight f6 or d5, you know you're in the London system. It's this getting the bishop outside the pawn chain, and on this, it's a fairly aggressive diagonal with some ideas of going after the c7 pawn, particularly in combination with this knight deployment. So it's a system that has some intent to it. It's not the most challenging system for white, but it's solid. And so you can't just kind of ignore the threats. You have to respond to them in some way. And I've always had some trouble dealing with the London system. So given the opportunity of this short game, I thought I would take some time and explore the opening and see if I could figure out a way to deal with the London system, because I have no particular plan myself for dealing with it. There is a video that Chess Explained did. I'll include a pointer to it in the description if I can find it, about how to deal with the London system ideas. But I only listened to it once. I thought it was interesting at the time, but somehow I never managed to have success with any of those ideas. So maybe I was trying to do too many different things at once or something. Maybe I should watch the video a few times. But anyway, I want to include that out there in case you guys get something from it. But let's just do a little mini exploration of the London system here. So I'm going to stick with this knight f6 idea for this video, like I said, because sometimes I'll play knight f6 first, sometimes I'll play d5 first. So I could get to this position from either move order. Either knight f6, d4, knight f6, bishop f4, d5. I could get to it from that order, or d4, d5, bishop f4, knight f6. So in either order, we end up in the same position. And the main move for white here is actually knight f3, but e3 is a second choice and also stays within the London system territory. And also knight f3 is often followed up by e3. So let's stick with the game for now. We'll go with e3. And I played the move e6. It is possible right here to play c5. And at least at a first glance, the chess engine likes this move. So that's something to consider, that early c5. If he takes right away, say c5 pawn takes, you always have this queen check to pick up the pawn. But let's see, I want to go on one more move here. Let's play e6, the second choice here, and then knight f3. And let's consider this. My opponent didn't play knight f3, so I'm sort of diverging from the game at this point. But let's consider this as sort of a canonical starting point for the London system. What can you play here as black to deal with this system? And the move I've been playing most often is bishop d6. It's interesting that it's in the opening book, but I have also played c5 in this position. So why don't we explore both of these options? First, let's check out the c5 option. Play c5. Then what's the main move here? c3. Yeah, I've seen this a lot, just bolstering the center. Knight c6 looks like normal development, and knight bd2. So we get this kind of system, and now bishop d6. So c5, leaving the pawn there, and bishop d6, countering the bishop. Okay, so that looks so far so good. Now, the engine likes to play d takes c5 here. Yeah, whenever this bishop comes out, it is immediately subject to a tempo gain. This position doesn't look that scary to me. The interesting thing is, since the move c3 was sort of provoked, there's no idea of the knight coming to b5 and coordinating with the bishop on c7. So that idea is gone in this line. Bishop e2 or bishop d3. Let's back up a move. Instead of taking, is there other ideas here? Bishop takes d6, queen takes. I'm not so worried about it. How about if he tries something like this? How about if he plops the knight here? Because I see this a lot. What's the best way to deal with this? Now queen c7. Trying to increase the pressure on this knight. and knight d to f3. Yeah, just reinforcing it. I've seen this kind of situation too. This is a little bit uncomfortable, but I can castle here. I mean, uncomfortable for black. You know, it looks like I'm getting some pressure here, but at the same time, you know, this knight here, this advanced knight is kind of annoying. And at any time, of course, he can take on c5 here and distract the bishop. Bishop to d3, just continuing to develop. What's a knight e4 or c4 kicking the bishop? I always want to take something. I want to open up a line. You know, it's just, if you just continue here. How about the move b6 here? Maybe I should just play like this. Rather than pushing on with c4 here, which would kind of close things up. Keep a little tension on the center, play b6, and then maybe this bishop can come here. So what's his best reply here? Maybe knight takes, queen takes. And then the other knight can hop in here. Queen drops back. Castles. I mean, these are just fairly logical looking moves in bishop b7. I was just playing them to see if something happens here to get me in trouble. Okay, this looks like a system I can play. I've got my pieces castled. I got my king castled. My rooks are connected. Queen's off the back rank. His pieces are looking a bit ominous, but nothing has happened yet. You know, white in the long run is going to try and play for the advance of the e-pawn. So having this bishop on b7 here looks like a good strategy. Okay, let's go back. Let's check out this branch that I was on. So we started with okay, in the game my opponent played c4. Let's go to the opening book. And but rather than follow the c4, I'm looking at this knight f3 line. I'm thinking this is like a canonical position in the London system. I can get this position on the board when somebody is playing the London system against me quite often. So if I could understand how to play this system as black, I guess I would be more confident. So that was option A. Option A was playing c5. And as we saw, we followed up with bishop here, queen here, knight here, and then later pawn to b6 and bishop to b7, and got a complete development that way, and castling. And not pushing on, but just holding this pawn structure and maintaining some tension in the center. And, you know, white can gain some tempo against the bishop, but he also gives up a little bit of center control when he does that, so maybe it's not so scary. And the bishop on b7 keeps some pressure along this diagonal and maybe discourages the e4 push. So seems like a reasonable way to play. Okay, so option 2 I wanted to look at is bishop to d6. Just the immediate challenge of the bishop. The immediate challenge of the bishop on this diagonal. Let's see, he can drop back to g3. I've seen this move. And then castle, say. This all looks okay. Now white can play c4 here, start to play a little more aggressively. He hasn't committed on the queen side, and I haven't put much pressure here. I would probably play something like c6, but looks like I could play b6 and get into kind of a Tartakover. Or I could take first. I don't especially like taking. It opens up this H-file for a quick attack against the king. You know, you shouldn't forget that the London system, even though it looks like kind of a quiet, innocuous setup and has kind of a dull reputation, it really is an attacking setup, and the intent is to push on with e4 and to go for a kingside attack. And, you know, this bishop has just been liberated outside the pawn chain. But taking it off at the expense of opening up the H-file, I don't know if I like that. So second choice here would be b6 if he just plays bishop back to g3. Leave the bishop here. Prepare to, I'm sorry, I played b6. The engine really, yeah, b6. Okay, I was going to say, did it really say g6? No, it was me. Pawn to b6. Preparing bishop to b7. Let's play on a few moves. So knight c3 seems like logical continuation. I could play with the immediate c5 and get to kind of a similar setup. He can take, if he takes now, I can actually take back with the pawn. Yeah, the engine is starting to like this for white. Let's back up a step. It still wants to take on g3 first. Play h6 or bishop b7. So let's go with bishop b7 here. C takes d5. I would take with the knight. Knight takes d5. Bishop takes. Seems okay for black. You've got a good diagonal here for the bishop. And if he trades, you can take back with either the pawn or the queen. What's white's best play here? a3. And where's the knight go? Knight to d7. This commits you to taking with the pawn here, but the knight can usefully come over here to the king side. I guess this is a playable position too, maybe with the idea of rook to c8 and then pawn to c5. You could play like that. White still needs to castle, but he could start with rook c1, putting some pressure here. Okay, so that looks like another line that's pretty viable. Let's see where we were. So starting with knight f3, we were looking at the bishop to d6 line, and we were looking at bishop to g3. A lot of times they don't play bishop g3. Yeah, there's one more line I wanted to look at here. Knight bd2. Well, let's quickly look at knight bd2. Then bishop takes f4. Yeah, messing up the pawn structure like this is interesting for white. White gets some counterplay here on the e5. I mean, he has control over that e5 square, but he also has doubled pawns. I wouldn't mind playing a position like this. Lets you try to undermine pretty quickly with c5, or maybe b6 and c5 building up a little more slowly, or just castling. Yeah, I think that would be okay. Let's back up. So instead of knight bd2, what I've seen, and what I really wanted to look at, is this knight to e5 move. It seems like the players with this London system, they like their dark squared bishop and they want to hold on to it. So they put this knight here. And well, a lot of times I've already played c5 in this position. You'll see something similar in the game when we get back to it. So I can't really play knight to d7. But it looks like knight to d7 here is playable. The bishop is supported by the pawn. He just keeps developing. You know, I can never take with the knight because he takes back with the pawn, forking those two pieces. So it seems a bit awkward to me. Okay, sack castle. And say he castles, or he could play knight c3, b6. So going for this b6 idea again. Okay, so of all these lines, I have to say the one I liked the best was this line with c5. So let's go to the game, through the game from the beginning, and just to fix this position in my mind, and then maybe yours too if you want to learn how to play this line against the London system. So d4, d5, bishop f4, knight f6, with the idea that you could have played knight f6 first and then followed up with d5. Those could happen in either order. Maybe true of white's moves as well. No, he's got to move the pawn before he moves the bishop out, so scratch that. Let's see, he goes on with e3, so I go e6. He went c4, but if he goes knight f3, this is the classic position of the London system, then there are different plans here. And yeah, it seems like the plan I liked best was the immediate c5, followed up with just these developing moves. Bring the knight out, bring the bishop out. Don't be afraid to challenge that bishop. And then the knight comes here. Bring the queen into this alignment, and then complete the development, pushing up this pawn to b6, bishop b7, and castling. Seems like a pretty logical setup. I'm going to try that the next time I face the London system. Anyway, in this game, he played, instead of playing knight f3 here, the normal move, knight f3, he played c4. So it's a bit of a spin. One thing about the London system, since it's a pretty solid setup, you can actually play around with the move order and try different things without, white hasn't taken any huge strategic risks, so it's not like he has to follow a precise path. That's also one of the reasons why it's hard to prepare against. So white has this kind of flexibility here. Let's see, the engine is liking bishop b4 check here, but I just went with c6, setting up a solid triangle. He goes knight f3. I went bishop d6 now, challenging this bishop. You can see I had this idea already. And he goes knight to e5. This is, like I said, very typical kind of move I've seen in a lot of these systems. But the chess engine really doesn't like that. It wants to take, and it wants to play knight to c3. Okay, but this is how the game went. He took. I dropped the bishop back because now, since I've advanced the c-pawn, I need the queen to support the bishop before I can put a piece on d7 to challenge that knight. So the way I played it is actually a bit slow, and so white gets more of an advantage here than maybe he should have. He should probably just continue developing rather than pushing on. This push, which seems to be pretty popular. I've seen this kind of thing a lot, where white just tries to expand on the queen side here. It's just not doing a whole lot, I don't think. You do have to be careful you don't get squashed somehow on the queen side, but I think in this case it's not doing a whole lot. And now just challenging the knight here seems good. He brings another knight out. And that's just a mistake. If we back up, after I challenge this knight here, I'm actually threatening to win some material, because I can take twice on the e5 square. That'll bring a pawn over here, and he'll have these two loose pawns here and here that I can attack with my other knight. So that's what happens in the game. He went knight c3. I took his knight. He takes back with the pawn here. He could have taken with the bishop first, but either way I would have still had this. I would trade bishops and I would still have this move knight to d7, forking those pawns. So that was his first mistake, was actually bringing that knight to c3 when he had to deal with the threat to e5 here. Anyway, there's two pawns hanging. He decides to defend the c-pawn by playing b4. And I grab here. And, of course, he needs to defend against this threat. Actually, the knight is just hanging there. So it's not even the threat of the check and take rook. You want to guard your loose pieces when they come under attack. And the simplest way to deal with it is to exchange. He didn't play that, but this is how the game might continue. But I've won a pawn here, and I've got a pretty good position. So his first mistake was that knight c3 move. But his final mistake was in this position. He played bishop d3, and I moved, and he resigned at about the same time. He must have seen this right after he played his move. But of course, that's a tactic you've always got to be alert for. That old fork with the king and the rook in the corner, not only winning a piece, but picking up the exchange there as well. So anyway, interesting discussion of the opening. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.